how do I hold all the loves that I have, the love I have of total Black liberation and the love I have of our mom? How do I hold those? And that feels like, oh, that's my responsibility as a Black mixed race woman to hold, and it's ours as a multiracial family to hold.
I'm Autumn Brown, a queer science fiction writer, a theologian, a mother of dragons, and a healing justice facilitator for social movements living in Minneapolis.
And I'm Adrienne Marie Brown, author of Emergent Strategy, Pleasure Activism, co-editor of Octavia's Brood, and facilitator, auntie extraordinaire, and I pay rent in Detroit.
And this is How to Survive the End of the World.
Our podcast about right now, today. No, a podcast about learning from apocalypse with grace, rigor, and curiosity.
Our apocalypse right now, and our podcast about it.
Yes, exactly. It's all happening. And today we wanted to spend a little bit of time on bringing ourselves in, really talking about us as Black biracial, Black mixed race people in the work, and as co-host of this. And, I was interested in this conversation and at least doing a level of unveiling here, because I feel like there's this pattern in movement, in culture, all over the place of Rachel Dolezals. Okay, the word racial and the word Rachel are different, but there's this collapse.
Racial Dolezals.
There's this pattern of racial Dolezals. But I'm sure that that's at the heart of some of this, right? Is that there's this pattern of people being irresponsible about race and about how they're showing up in a very complex conversation about it. And there's a pattern of racial ambiguity and people benefiting from that racial ambiguity, cultural appropriation, all these different things that are happening. And for me, I think so much of what's important is to be exactly who the fuck you are, like whoever that is. And I feel like race is one of those places, and Blackness is one of those places where it's so important to really just sit with, this is the Black experience that I have. This is the Black experience that we have. And there's no need to be performing something or checking off some list of like, here's how Blackness needs to be done or anything else. I think it's really important that we each be telling the honest story of our Black experiences. And I think the more of those that get told, I think the harder it is then for people to come in with something that's actually not Black experience and take up any space with it. And I also think the more we can actually embrace the different kinds of pain and trauma and brilliance and incredible experience of, all that Blackness has actually come to hold in this time. So just that, I wanted to spend a little time with each of us getting to share, because even one of the things that's so interesting to me is that you and I come from the same family, but we have different experiences of how race has played out in our lives, different experiences of how it shaped our worlds. And it feels important to me to just be like, even at that level. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is really, it's interesting because we've had it in mind to have this conversation for a couple of years now. It's, just inside view for listeners that we have this, we have a document that we call our treasure chest, where we have our sort of running list of all the things that we know we want to talk about. And this one has been in there for a while. And I think it felt especially important, given some of what's happening right now, to actually go there. And I think that there is, in my work, one of the things that I'm always having to sort of do with, especially inside of supporting social movement organizations is helping people understand that Blackness is not a monolith.
Exactly.
And the Black experience is not a monolithic, homogenous experience.
Right.
And in fact, like in reality, I think as almost any Black person can tell you, it's like the Black experience is as heterogeneous as each of us who are a part of the Black experience. Like it's very it's so dynamic and so
Wait.
heterogeneous.
What's that? What does that mean? Does that mean not
diverse,
you.
like not the same. Okay. Homogenous being the same, heterogeneous meaning not the same.
Teach me.
And it's right, not hetero in that.
I hear hetero
sense,
and all my flags go up, like hell no, and I'm like, wait, maybe you mean something good.
It's always important to remember that these words have their own definitions outside of the ways that they get pulled into
heterarchy,
categorizing ourselves. But yeah, just that like, and I think I can just start from my own experience that I feel like I feel like I'm probably not alone in this, that whiteness taught me that I was Black. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I think I was definitely, and I ID as a mixed race Black woman, and it was many years. I had many years where I didn't ID as Black at all. And I had many years where, I very, very explicitly and very rigidly identified as mixed or as multiracial or as biracial, and specifically was like, I am mixed, I am multiracial, I am not white, I am not Black, like I am something else entirely. And that is true, right? Like that is not untrue. But and I think in terms of my own identity development, my own identity formation, like it was an important part of my identity formation to resist any attempts to categorize me into any binary, right? Like that was always a part of my childhood experience, right? And I remember our parents being particularly ferocious about our right to self-identify, and, going into our classrooms and informing our teachers, like, you don't get to tell this child how she's supposed to identify racially. That is only for her to decide. It's not even for us to decide, because her experience is going to be fundamentally different than ours, and like it's not our job. And so I always felt a sense of ownership around like how I'm going to identify. I think that also left me in a space of, unfortunately, for a long period of time, of having an apolitical relationship to my racial identity.
Yeah.
And which I think to some extent was like also a survival mechanism for being in, I went from completing middle school and then high school in a very racially diverse place to then entering an elite college institution that was 90% white students at the point that I entered school there.
90%.
90%. Yeah. I went to college, and like it was the whitest space I'd ever been in.
Yeah.
And I think that was supportive to my survival to hold an apolitical stance related to my own race. And to really just, I just really didn't orient to it at all while I was in college. And even my organizing work was very like neutral and vis-a-vis race. And again, I think that was just like I was surrounded by white people. All the people I was in relationship pretty much with were white people. Like it wasn't super safe for me to do that kind of exploration there. So it didn't really happen until, the year after I graduated from college was Hurricane Katrina. And so much else that unfolded in those years. that really pushed me to start to understand my racial identity differently, start to understand my racial identity through an explicitly political lens. And then truly it was like moving to rural Minnesota, um, living in a rural white space, being a part of a white family, um, and um, and being racially profiled repeatedly in that white space.
Yep.
That completely shifted my relationship to my Blackness, and really in a way forced me to start to really like reckon with and deeply understand myself as a Black woman.
Yes.
And of course I've gone rounds with it. And the more deeply that I understand myself as a Black woman, the more whole I feel as a person,
Yes.
So it's been very much a healing journey, but it's been a healing journey that's in part been promoted through experiencing trauma related to how other people are interacting with me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Yeah. How would you describe your
that journey
arc?
Yeah,
so far.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like when I think back, I also feel like we had that experience of our parents being very oriented towards you're something beyond what either of us experienced in life. And they were so oriented to taking us away from the racism that they had experienced, taking us away from the racial dynamics that they had grown up in. And so I feel like I had that experience when I was younger, when we were first starting out, that it was like, oh yeah, I have everything available from both of my parents. Like whatever they have access to, I have access to those things, but with no consciousness around like, what does that actually mean? And we were in military base environments where a ton of other people were mixed race. There was, people often thought that our mom, who's white from the deep South, they often thought that she was German because there were so many mixed race Black and German couples, and there were so many mixed race Black and Japanese couples because of the legacy of colonialism, which again, didn't know that as a 7-year-old, now can look back and be like, oh, that's why everyone around us was mixed. And being mixed, multiracial, biracial is also not a monolithic experience. Each of those experiences was very different. And as I've gotten older, it's actually been kind of mind-blowing to me to meet people who were always told they were basically whichever is the not white. They're like, you're that from day one.
Right.
And people who are like, you're both, or people who are just kind of like, you're a slightly darker person who is going to just assimilate into white culture. I mean, all of the above. And for me, there were some key points. So there was a key moment in school in which I was racially targeted and actually failed a class because of being racially targeted and got sent to a summer school program. And in the summer school program, everyone was Black. And, I had been in mostly multiracial spaces, Black, Asian, white spaces. And this was in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was like the first time I was in a space that was all Black and mostly people who were class poor. Right. And that was an eye-opening political experience for me. And I look back and I'm like so grateful that happened early in my life, because there was such a clear, for me, there was people in the class were like, what are you doing here? And the way they oriented towards me, it was just like, you don't belong necessarily in this space. And I was also, like, what is this? What's happening? I'm trying to understand what is y'all's experience. And then making connections of like, actually the folks in this classroom deeply align with the experience of our father's family. And because we've grown up moving all the time, we haven't had a ton of exposure to our father's family or our mother's family. Like we've been in a little 5-person pod moving through military experiences. So that experience made me curious about family in a different way. And I feel like I would take seriously our visits to family after that and just being like, who are y'all? Who are y'all? What's going on here?
Right. Right.
None of y'all have any money, but everyone's acting like they do. What is going, like just trying to understand how race interplayed with class, how race interplayed with education, how race interplayed with how I talked and how people perceived me
Mm-hmm.
and what it meant to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And and then for me, I went to also an elite college, but it wasn't 90% white. I think it was about 60 at the time, um, 60,
Wow.
70. But I landed almost immediately in the Black Students Organization. Like, I feel like I was on the campus for maybe like 2 weeks or something and already got gathered up by Black students and
Right.
by Black student
Right.
organizing spaces. And actually, the same thing happened to me when I first went, like when I landed for high school in Atlanta. Black students gathered me up in that space too, and they were like, "Oh, you kind of sing. We'll help you figure out how to do that better, right?" Because we hadn't been growing up. We've
They
been
were
in
like,
like
let's take you from good to great,
they're
sister.
like, "We can help you." It sounds like no one ever taught you how to do runs. You should know how to do that,
Mm-hmm.
or different things like that, right? So, but I felt like I kept having these experiences of Black community being like, "Actually, you belong with us," and I don't know how this, what your life has been like before, but we're going to claim you here. And I had that experience multiple times. And in college, that happened again, where I felt this claiming and I felt this need to really understand Black history, mixed race identity, light skinned identity, the distinctions between those two, and how for so many people
Right.
in our communities, if they were light skinned, it meant there was a history of rape, there was a history of harm, it was a very different kind of history than what I was coming into, which was our parents are a love story. And my
Right.
parents love each other and they want us to, they want peace in the world, like, all this different kind of energy, right? Um, I feel like I think the last thing I'll say on it is that way that I got politicized into understanding the power of Blackness, my own and others, and the persecution of Blackness in the country has shaped everything that has come after that. That now, when I look back, I understand, I appreciate our parents' way of seeing the world. And I also understand the naivety of it and the
Yeah.
idealism of it
Yeah.
and how young they were, that they were like in their early 20s. They had neither of them been really politicized in that way. They just fell in love with each other and were both moving away from oppressive conditions that were different for each of them. And I look back at it and I see how the shaping of white supremacy moved through our family. And I see myself and I see you and I see the way that we now move in our family as a reclaiming of Blackness against white supremacy inside of an intimate setting. And I love the work that I've gotten to do in my life. But I think something I've also been aware of all along is trying over and over again not to take up space because of my mixed race identity, because of proximity to whiteness, because of imprinting of whiteness. So I've thought many times about, am I the right person to step into leadership? How quickly can I hand the leadership over to someone who is Black and without a mixed race aspect to it? How quickly can I hand it over to
Mm-hmm.
someone who comes from a different class background than me and comes from a different educational background than me, who might not have had access to these spaces, but who I can create access around these spaces for.
Mm-hmm.
And then, also figuring out like, how do I make sure that I take my leadership, take leadership and uplift the ideas of people who are Black, Indigenous, and poor. And I really try to pay attention to that because I think that that's ultimately what we're all supposed to do, is just be attending to how does privilege show up in our lives and how does oppression show up in our lives and how do we in our choices flip the decks.
Right. That's so real. Yeah, I feel like I do feel like there's a there's a dance that's always happening in me between um you know, especially because of how much study I have invested in white supremacy. I can feel so clearly the ways that white supremacy and whiteness has shaped my life.
Yeah.
And then the dance is between the way that I can feel that so clearly and so obviously, and the ways that I have to seek the sensation of blackness, right? The ways that I have to, like go deeper to find it. And it's complicated because the world, you know, I mean, this depends on where I am geographically, but particularly in Minnesota, it's not like, you know, I'm viewed in most spaces that I move in, I'm seen as a Black woman. It's not like I'm not being seen or experienced as a Black woman. I mean, of course, like I have green eyes and I have light skin, and so I think that like that there's I've gone through lots of different ways that I'm perceived over the years. But I do, you know, and again, especially living in rural Minnesota, I was definitely perceived and treated as a Black woman when I lived there. And so it's not that I'm not moving through the world as a Black woman, but one of the ways that whiteness has shaped me is that it's like dulled my ability to feel it for myself. And so I'm having to, especially in a lot of my adult life, I've had to do a lot of like shedding in order to get deeper, get more deeply into it. So I think that also puts me in this place where I'm always figuring out like, okay, how am I in relationship with whiteness, and how am I drawing boundaries with whiteness, right? Like how am I in relationship with it? How am I understanding it? How am I understanding the way it's shaping me and the way it's shaping my community and the way it's shaping the people that I know and love? And also, how am I drawing real boundaries with it because I understand that it's fundamentally a site of trauma?
Yeah. You know, something I've been really reflecting on lately is when I was first coming into organizing, there was such a pattern around caucusing. Like anytime we would get into a space, it'd be like, we need to caucus, like Black people over here, white people need to go over here, Latin, or at the time we didn't say Latinx, we said Latino people over here. Like, you know, whatever was happening in the group, it was like break out into these groups and have these conversations. And then it felt like there was a big moving away from that being a norm, that we were moving into a different kind of political space. And maybe that wasn't what was necessary. What was necessary was being in relationship with each other, figuring out diversity, figuring out inclusion, figuring out all these things. And right now I feel like there's been this move back towards really needing to be in strong caucus conversations, because so much is shifting at the tectonic plate level in terms of how the whole country is now talking about race. And the move is so quickly to put a capitalist, like, let's just put the skin of racial awareness on top of things, and let's put a theme song to racial awareness, and like every ad now looks more diverse, and you know, we're all saying the right thing, and like every sporting event is covered in like Black lives obviously matter, like we're down. But
just so you know, IBM also believes that Black lives do matter.
Think so. Exactly, right? So then inside that cauldron, which is like, what is this, right? Then I think it becomes even more important to do that caucus work, to be like, wait, where are we right now? Who are we right now? How are we right now? How are we in relationship with each other? And I think inside of any Black caucus, there does need to be some space for mixed race and light skinned folks to be in some conversation with each other around how are we accountable right now for the space we're taking up?
Right.
And how do we not succumb to what I think can happen, which is we start to punish ourselves within the community for the trauma and harm that has come at the community, right? And so we start to be like, well, it's your fault that this is happening. And it's like, no. None of us chose to be inside the white supremacy cauldron or spectrum. And most of us are not trying to benefit from it. However, that doesn't mean that there's not benefit. That doesn't mean there's not impact. That doesn't mean there's not responsibility. So how do we take on that responsibility? And I think right now is a powerful moment to take a different level of that labor on. That is like, it's not a work that I see done very much or done very often or done very skillfully yet. And
Yeah.
what I'm really interested in is like, maybe that's part of the calling that I'm in, maybe that's part of the calling that we're in, who knows. But I'm getting more and more curious about it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do I hold in one hand my vision of Wakanda, and in my other hand the the fact that, you know um there's some people who would look at your children and be like, do they belong in Wakanda? Right? Like, I want to
Exactly.
be able
Yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
like, how do I hold all the loves that I have, the love I have of total Black liberation and the love I have of our mom? How do I hold those? And that feels like, oh, that's my responsibility as a Black mixed race woman to hold, and it's ours as a multiracial family to hold. And then I'm starting to want to be in a more accountable conversation with other people who are mixed race and light skinned
Yeah.
about how do we fit into this in a way that doesn't detract from Black liberation vision, but adds to it and deploys whatever privilege we have towards it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I have to say, I feel like this has been for me. I don't think that it was until very recently that I understood that this question exactly was one of the guiding principles of my work.
yeah.
But it really has been one of the guiding principles of my work over the last decade, because I think from pretty early on in my career, I, I felt like I understood myself as someone who, like, through proximity to whiteness, like, that, like, I had this, like, oh, I have like a superpower. I can deeply understand not just like what whiteness is, but how whiteness is operating at like a cellular level inside of
Yes.
white people. And I'm understanding it because of the way that I'm bridging those spaces in my cellular body, right?
Yes.
And so I feel in myself this, and I have felt for many years, this like really strange capacity to both understand what's happening inside of white people,
Yeah.
and to name it, and to train people in practices that actually subvert those dynamics that are happening at a cellular level. Right now I'm in this process, as you know, of like trying to figure out how I document and then transmit the approach that I take to working with white people around this, because I do feel like there's something there that a lot more people in our movements could benefit from if there was a way for me to just like take it out of my brain and like transmit it as like as a tool. But I do feel like to me, it feels like this is my contribution I can make to movements right now, is that I can work with whiteness at that cellular level and say, you feel like we were talking about in our last episode, it's like you may feel powerless to do anything about the way you've been shaped, but you're not powerless. And in fact, it is like through uncovering the power and the healing capacity inside their bodies that they can actually help to shift off this trajectory that they've put us on, right? And so, but I think that the challenge then for me is, again, that like it's that dance of being like, I can be in this work takes me into really painful territory. And it's painful territory that isn't all mine, right? Because I also have my own stuff that's about being mixed and about being Black. And like I think the tension that I've been holding a lot in the last couple of years is like, how much more time and energy and life force do I give to this work that I do believe is really important around whiteness? And then how much space am I carving out for me, right? Like my body, my healing, me. Top culture.
Well, before we go to top culture, I just want to say I really appreciate what we covered here. I also know it's like tip of the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg, and that there's so much more to explore. And that not everyone is interested in hearing mixed race people talk about stuff. So I would love to hear back from people, like, because that's one of the things I often feel like I just sit back with it. I try not to take up space, particularly in Black space, around this conversation, because I'm like, this just may not be of interest to Black folks that much, and to people who are not mixed in any way, or don't understand themselves that way, because whatever mixing happened more generations back, or happened in a different way. So I'm interested in hearing from readers, like, listeners, is this something that y'all want to hear about? Is this something you want us to explore further? Are there people you'd like to have us hear from or invite into this conversation? I would just love to ask for that explicit feedback if you're open to giving it to us. Totally. Top culture. Top culture. So
I'll go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Well, because I guess we only have a couple of minutes, not as much time as we would typically like to have. I just have to say, again, late adopter. I just watched Hamilton for the first time ever on Saturday with my children. I fucking loved it. And I have to say, like, I'm one of those people, especially when there's a lot of hype around something, I tend to be very skeptical about it. I was super skeptical about Hamilton because of all the reasons why you might imagine I would be skeptical about something that's about the founding of the country. And even with all of that, even with all of the skepticism, because I went into it just being like, well, we'll see if I could even like this. And, musical theater had took over as soon as the lights went down on the stage. And I was just like, I am here for this. I'm here for the costumes. I'm here for the hair. I'm here for the, like, gay king. Very George gay. With his da 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 da. I was just like, I'm here for every last little bit of this show. I definitely feel the time capsule of it, of course, the feeling of like, oh yeah, this is like the kind of creative work that really could only have been made during the Obama era, right? Like, you would not, like, a musical like this could not be written now.
Right.
It was of a moment in time in which I think everyone was orienting differently to, like, the political possibility inside of reimagining the past to reimagine the future.
Yes.
So I feel that time capsule-ness, and even with that, I adored it. And Leslie Odom Jr. made me like just believe in musical theater all over again. So yes, that was my top culture. Again, I know I'm delayed, but I'm always going to be delayed. So therefore. That's what it is.
So I am so excited that you finally watched Hamilton, because I was starting to feel a little like, girl, like, I'm not going to lead you astray on this. I know your theater heart. And I also, I've had this feeling about a lot of people who were very skeptical of Hamilton. They were like, I don't know about a rap musical. I'm like, nobody did. Nobody thought that was a good idea. And I actually watched an interview with the cast where David Diggs was like, yeah, I thought this was a horrible idea until I heard the music, until I got to actually feel and see it. And I think as an act of fantasy, I think that's, for me, that's how I have to enjoy it. Is just like, it's a fantasy to imagine that anyone was really in the Founding Fathers holding an anti-slavery stance the way they present it. It's a fantasy of having Black and brown people in all of these roles. It's a fantasy to turn it into, take it to the level of a musical. It's a fantasy to have everybody so self-aware inside of the impacts that they're having. There's so many levels of it that are fantastical. Right. And it's, to me, I'm able to enjoy it as a fantastical act, and then I'm able to enjoy it as a theatrical offer, which is like, it's a conversation starter. It's an emotion generator. It like does all the things that I want great theater to do. And I mean, I have listened to it, watched it over and over and over again. And I never got to see it in real life. So every experience I've had it has been listening to the soundtrack. And for people to know, one of my nibblings from another sibling is was born, and it was the soundtrack of the first weeks of her life. And this was a dear Black friend of mine that we would just put it on and just be like, I can't believe that I'm feeling this way about this fantastical version of George Washington or this fantastical version of Thomas Jefferson or whatever. You know, I'm just like, these songs, these humanizing these people is politically dangerous and is politically fascinating, right? It's like to imagine that, yes,
and it's musically thrilling.
And it's musically thrilling, right? It's just sort of like, oh my gosh, like someone who could be a slave owner could also feel this way about founding a nation and have this much heart in, you know, I was like, oh shit, like I don't know if I don't know, should I don't know. It just feels, there's something about it that feels so taboo to me to engage with.
Right.
It does.
Totally.
Like liking Hamilton feels taboo to me, even though it's something that so many people embraced. So many people went and paid huge money to go see, you know, like, so I love it. I love it as an art work. And I'm sad because there was this counter play that Ishmael Reed wrote, and they aired it like one time, and I wasn't able to make the one time that they aired it this summer. But it's supposed to be like a critical, like a counter where all these other historical figures from that time who are Black and brown and enslaved people and other folks come and kind of, I guess, talk to Lin-Manuel about.
Oh, yeah, the haunting of Lin-Manuel.
The haunting of Lin-Manuel. Yes, that's what it is, right?
Yes.
So I really want to see that, and I'm hoping that it shows again sometime, because I think I'm like, yes, I'm here for all of that. And I'm also here for like, there's a brilliance to this particular thing that is, to me, an undeniable brilliance, unless you just hate musical theater. And then it's fine. Just hate it. You can also, people seem to really get joy out of their hating of it too. So
yeah. I'm like, whatever vector of pleasure you're experiencing this on, like, go for it. Thanks for listening to our show. We're on Twitter and Instagram at End of the World PC. We're also on Facebook at End of the World Show.
You can make a sustaining donation to our show if you want to. We're really aware that this is a moment where a lot of things are drawing on your resources. So this is truly a deeply optional thing. If you want to, it feels of use to you, please make a donation on our page, patreon.com/endoftheworldshow.
Another incredibly helpful thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is to write us a review on Apple Podcasts if you are an iPhone person. Thank you.
How to Survive the End of the World show is produced and edited by the incomparable Zach Rosen.
Music for today's show comes from Tunde Alaniran and Mother Cyborg.